we break down the signing of Dakota Dozier and walk through is Ryan Poles officially done with the offensive line next on the Unbearable Sports Podcast.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a.
And welcome back into the Unbearable Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Barron, and as a lot of you guys might have known, I'm a little bit sick right now. That's what's been taking us so long, but this is another pod, another sick day, but still cruising through. So please make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and also, if you don't think you're going to make it all the way to the end of the video, if you're watching on YouTube, you can just actually subscribe to the Unbearable Sports Podcast on any podcast listening station like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever you like. We are there. But today, the Bears signed a new offensive guard, Dakota Dozier. So what we're going through today is we're going to break down the X's and O's, what we think about Dakota Dozier, what to expect out of the signing, and also, is actually Ryan Poles done with the offensive line with this rebuild? I hope not. But let's just talk about what is he maybe looking for, and also what can he do to potentially make this a little bit better so that our most prized possession is standing upright next year. So let's get started with the main piece. So Dakota Dozier, he's added in from the Minnesota Vikings, new addition, and he's about 30 years old. So you know what? Ryan Poles popped his cherry. This is his first veteran free agent signing. Everyone else is always, under 30. So you know what? Good job. but still, Dakota Dozier, he spent, I think, about 3 years with the Minnesota Vikings, and before that was with the New York Jets. Really only had 1 year of starting experience in 2020 with the Minnesota Vikings, and we'll definitely break that down. But first off, right off the bat, what I like about him is his versatility on the interior of the line. He's played both left guard and right guard for the Jets and for the Minnesota Vikings, so you at least have somebody that can flip-flop when necessary. He even played a little bit of center, but he's not a primary center. But we already are pretty set at center as well. But really think of him as somebody that can go back and forth at that guard spot. But do I think that he's actually going to be the starter? I hope not. I hope that he's not the center. Not saying that it's a bad signing, because I think he's at least a good versatile person to go back and forth, but I don't think that he should be your starter day one. And why? Just looking back at it, I'm looking at the stats from PFF. So actual stats rather than the actual grades. So if you're curious, his PFF blocking grades are not good. They're in the 50s, so that was already saying that he's not that great. But also, we're Bears fans. We've watched the Minnesota Vikings. We know darn well their weakness is in the guards. And Dakota Dozier was one of those guards that we got to take advantage of. He wasn't the right guard over in Akeem Hicks a bunch, but still at that left guard spot, he really did suffer. Now, one of my favorite stats that I just want to bring up here is this pass blocking efficiency. So what that means is you basically take the total number of snaps that the player has had, and then or the total number of sacks, hurries, and hits, and you add that all together. Then you divide that by the number of snaps, and that's basically how we calculate their pass efficiency. Because obviously, the lower, it's basically your success rate of keeping the quarterback clean without a hurry, a sack, or a hit. So you want it to be higher. So let's just say James Daniels. James Daniels last year had a pass blocking efficiency grade of, or percentage of 94.9. So about 95% of the time, James Daniels was not letting somebody through the line and after Justin Fields. So pretty good. Cody Whitehair is about 95% as well. So that's the guards that we had last year. Now, keep in mind, too, we hate our offensive line. So where does Dakota Dozier sit? So his career number is 91.9. So not that great, about 92%. So how does that compare to other people on the Bears? We talked about the guards, but also at tackle. Let's just say Tevin Jenkins, the rookie tackle that probably he struggled a little bit, but his efficiency number was 94.1%. So still higher, and at tackle you're getting even more pressure because you're more so left out on an island, so your tackles should allow more pressure, but he's been a more efficient pass blocker than Dakota Dozier. Sam Mustipher, 96.6, which I think is unbelievable, but he is a center, so he'll get the pass. But Larry Borum's pass blocking efficiency is the exact same as Dakota Dozier at 91.9. So obviously, we hope that Larry Borum can take the next step. And also, we have to keep in consideration, too, he is a tackle. So, all this to say that I just don't think that Dakota Dozier is going to be a starter. He shouldn't be a starter. Even though that he has experience as a starter, he shouldn't be a starter. He's a good backup. Think of him more as the replacement of Alex Bars. That's the way that I'm at least thinking about him. Is just that backup type of a guy, but not saying it's bad. Just saying that he's not a great player by any stretch of the imagination, because just the numbers, he just hasn't been all the way there. But obviously, I hope that he can take a step forward with us. But we at least have another guard, because before that, it was looking like Lachavius Pig Simmons was going to be that right guard. Now it looks like Simmons is more so just the backup for that right guard spot. But that's about it from Dakota Dozier. So if that's all you came here for, there you go. But let's keep breaking down this offensive line, because are we done yet? Because really, the only people that we've added from a blocking perspective, keeping the franchise upright, we added Lucas Patrick. Now, Lucas Patrick was someone that I was kind of thinking maybe he's a right guard. If you actually watch, if you play Madden, he's actually listed as a right guard. But on a lot of computers, he's listed as center. And when Lucas Patrick was introduced to the Chicago Bears, he was mentioning that he is told that he's going to be a center, which I really like that, because you have somebody that understands the system, knows what Getsy needs, and he's going to be that center that you can develop with Justin Fields for the next couple years. So I like that. It was just a little shocking, because I was just curious, how much do we actually like Mustafa? So to me, that center position is set. You have Lucas Patrick, you have Mustafa. Obviously, if somebody in the draft, like if Zion Johnson drops to us, then yes, you go and you pick him up. But still, you're pretty much set at that center spot, which is good. We're at least set there. But there's another blocker that we picked up that we have not yet talked about. Yet again, I was out for a week, being sick, still a little sick. But we have not talked about the fullback, Kari Blazingame. I know it might be Blazing Aim or something. I like Blazing Game. So Kari Blazingame that we got from the Tennessee Titans. We finally have a fullback. And like we've talked about before, the fullback position should be very, very important to this offense, because remember, it's the Mike Shanahan or the Shanahan type of system, and what they always have they have Kyle Juszczyk. And even with the Packers, they had Joseph Jaguara that they wanted as that fullback role. The fullback role is a legitimate spot in this offense. So also, I haven't seen many contract details. It's probably just going to be a 1 year deal. I'd be shocked if it's anything more. But really just what to expect out of him. So he didn't play a lot with the Tennessee Titans. They didn't run a lot of fullback sets. So he only had about, I have 50 snaps at fullback in a run blocking situation last year. And then the year before in 2020, it was all the way up to 118. Just as a comparison, Kyle Juszczyk is about 250 run blocking snaps per year. So a little bit different. So hopefully this is a huge upgrade for him, because he should be more involved in this offense. And overall, yet again, I'm not going to just grind the tape on a lot of the fullback film, but his blocking grades are actually pretty good from a PFF perspective. He had about a 70 run block grade last year, and where that kind of goes up with, we'll just kind of put it up against Kyle Juszczyk. Juszczyk does kind of grade in that 70 type of area. So that's a promising sight to see because chances are our fullback is more so going to be a blocker than an actual receiver. If you watch his highlights, which I have, it's just dump offs because that's all that he was really doing. That's all you're really looking for with your fullback. He has not broken a tackle ever, so don't expect him to be going crazy. He's just going to be a blocker and a dump off type of a target. But still, I'm excited that we do have a fullback in this system, and maybe we bring in another one. Maybe we bring in an undrafted rookie free agent just as a little bit of competition, just because competition in any situation is always a good thing. But that's all the people that we've brought in. So, like I said, if we're just looking at this blocking, you're set at the center position, but then at the left guard you have Cody Whitehair, who has been a little bit off of his game. He's no longer playing at that Pro Bowl level, and what I always feel with him too is he always does really well a a maybe a fourth of the season. Then he does like okay for about half the season. Then he has like a quarter of the season where he just sucks. so so for me, I just want to see more consistency out of him. And I know that there was rumors that he was going to be cut. Maybe he's still on the chopping block, but still, he's obviously on this team, and I really hope that we don't get rid of him because he's still a good guard to have, and we already have enough cap space, and we're not spending it on anything, even though that we have a whole bunch of cap space still on hand. So really, this is the big question for me is it goes up to Ryan Poles to say, what do you think of these tackles? That to me is the biggest question because what does he think of these tackles? If he loves these rookie tackles, then don't sign anybody. Because if you love these tackles, it's great to have two rookie deal tackles if you really like them. But the rumor is supposedly when Poles came into Hallis Hall, he was not a fan of Larry Borum. He sounded like he liked Tevin Jenkins, but Borum, not so much. So that might be something to we don't know after the tape review if he likes him or doesn't like him. He's keeping that closer to the vest. But there's a lot of people that did say that Borum just wasn't the guy. And towards the end of the year, Borum was getting slaughtered by the Minnesota Vikings. He had some good games, but by no means he wasn't amazing, but he was solid and he gave you solid production out of a fifth or sixth rounder. I'm blanking on when they drafted him, but that's you have to ask that question: is are you fine with that, or do you want to step it up? Personally, I want to step it up because I saw Borum all the time. He'd always get pushed back into the quarterback. And yes, it wasn't like the person was getting by him, I felt. I just felt like he was always getting pushed back. And because of that, it throws off the quarterback saying, okay, do I have to start to run now? Do I have to get out of here? Do I have to go do something different? So to me, I like the idea of bringing in a tackle. That to me is when you're looking at free agents, if you bring in a tackle, then that creates some competition. You have your tackle and you have Jenkins on the other tackle. That's set. And then basically, Borum, you have him fighting that veteran that you brought in, and you have him fighting for that guard spot. And then you're pretty much set. So then in the draft, if something better comes up, you can bring that person in, and then Borum becomes more of a swing tackle for you. That's the reason why I like the idea of still bringing in a veteran tackle. So let's go through just who's out there. But first, I actually want to be breaking down the draft because I think when we break down the draft, it's going to be a little bit more important. But also too, it's pretty important to say this as well. Teron Armstead is no longer going to be a Bear. He's officially a Miami Dolphin. So our hopes and dreams are crushed. And honestly, it was a lot cheaper than a lot of experts predicted. You have 5 years, $15 million. Now, one thing I want to just kind of just mention about this is obviously a lot of Bears fans are not happy about this. I'm I was bummed because it would have been cool, but I'm not super disappointed about it. And part of it is there's a really interesting article, and I'll bring this up next episode, and actually like show you guys. But PFF was breaking this down and talking about how if you sign somebody to a 5-year deal, chances are it's only going to last about 2 or like 3 years. It's really not like you sign a 5-year deal and you cut them no matter what. What I think Ryan Poles is trying to do is I think he's trying to be similar to like the Patriots or similar to the Ravens, teams that use the compensatory picks. The Bears have been bad with those. The only time that we get compensatory picks is from draft picks. We don't get them from free agents that just make it out to free agency. It's rare that we have an Allen Robinson that sticks through the entire contract because Pace just had so many bad contracts. What I think Ryan Poles is trying to do is he's signing these short term deals so that, like, you don't feel like you're handcuffed to them and you're cutting them. And just so people that don't know what the compensatory pick formula is basically if you have a player and they hit free agency like Allen Robinson and he signs a big deal, the Bears basically get a compensatory pick, so compensation for that player signing a big deal elsewhere. Now, we would lose that pick if we ended up signing someone for equivalent money. And that's where also the Ogunjobi deal falling through was also really nice for the Chicago Bears because when that deal goes through, the Bears are most likely going to get a compensatory pick for Allen Robinson now because they don't have anyone else that's really getting paid in the tens of millions of dollars. So I think maybe that's part of his rationale too is he wants people to make it to free agency. So if they're good, he can either re-sign them or get compensated for that person's contract. And you don't have to keep all this extra dead money since we have over $40 million in dead cap space this year. But I digress. Let's get into just like the possible people that we could draft. And the big reason why I just want to bring this up. So, this isn't the offensive line overview for the draft. We'll do that at a later date. But I just want to talk about who we could potentially get, just so that we're thinking about should Ryan Poles really sign a player right now or should he wait? Because in the draft, this is where it gets a little bit nerve wracking. I'm using the where someone might go based on the draft network's mock draft. I don't use PFF's mock draft board because that I feel is very off. It's very like unrealistic a little bit. So that's why I like the draft networks. But this is what they're saying is that in our first three picks, so our 2 second rounders and our third, there's only going to be 3 tackles that we would potentially have the ability to draft. Because other people, they're projecting they're more interior players. And that's what's kind of scary. You don't want to put all your eggs into just 3 people and just hope that they're there and just kind of pick them for the sake of picking them. The 3 people are Daniel Falele out of Minnesota, who's just a gigantic beast at right tackle. And is he big enough? Is he too big? Is the big question because you need to have some form of speed on that outside at that tackle position. But that's the big question with him. The next is Nicholas Petit Ferrer out of Ohio State. So he's the left tackle for Justin Fields. And he would be nice to kind of bring him back. He's nothing excellent, but he's a solid tackle prospect. The last one, this is someone who, if he's available, Chicago Bears need to run up because to me, he's projected to go in the first round, but he's been going later and later and later with all the crazy draft combines that have been going out there. And that's Bernard Raymond out of Central Michigan. He's a left tackle, and he's just an absolute student of the game, very smart player. He came in, I believe, as a tight end. So he's a very athletic player, and he's learning as much as he can at the offensive line position, and he's great. And the reason why I think he's dropping is because you see all these other like just huge mammoth people that just dominated the combine. And then you see him, he's just a good blocker. And so to me, if he's on that board, I say you just run up there and you just pick him up and you draft him. But I also want to bring up another thing too when we're talking about drafting offensive linemen. One thing that I'm always nervous about, like if I'm building the team, I want to make sure that my offensive line is somewhat set. Like like I mentioned, you sign an offensive tackle so that you have competition at a couple other spots, and then your best five play. The big reason is I don't like to rely on a rookie because with offensive line, it's very difficult to hide a bad player. While with like a wide receiver, you just don't really have to play him. You can kind of put him in at a couple snaps, make sure that they get some reps, and then you can kind of gradually bring them into the lineup. Same thing with the tight end. You don't have a rotation of offensive linemen. It's you're the starter or you're not. So to me, that's where I get a little bit nervous if we are relying on a draft pick on this offensive line. Let me know what you think about that because to me, it's like that's something that I don't think enough people talk about is you don't just want to throw a rookie out there and just have blind faith. So that's why I think we do need to sign at least somebody unless they really have faith in Dozier and Larry Borum. But let's keep on going to this interior line because this is the reason why I wanted to bring this up first. Is that at this interior line spot, this is where you have a lot of depth at this at this spot because you have Tyler Smith out of Tulsa, Sean Rain out, and then out of UCLA, Jamari Salier out of Georgia, Dylan Parham out of Memphis, Darian Kennard out of Kentucky, Ed Ingram out of LSU, Cole Strange out of Chattanooga. These are all interior people that you can have, and they're in that second to third round range. So just before that, we were talking about three people. And now with this, we're talking around, seven, eight or so. So that's the big difference. That's why to me, you need to figure out this tackle position if you're Ryan Poles. Because this interior spot, there's good talent that you can have that can compete with if you wanted Larry Borum to be a right guard. If you wanted, maybe you say, hey, we actually really like Mustafa, and he's going to be the starting center. And you know what, Patrick, you're actually going to be right guard now. There's a lot of backup. There's a lot of good people that you could potentially get at the guard spot. It's the tackle position that gets me nervous because it's all about what we're thinking up top. Because let's go over to this free agents. Because actually, before we do that, there's been so many different trades, and offensive linemen, for the most part, never really get traded. So that's another reason is that you're not seeing as many offensive. The only offensive lineman you've seen traded is Orlando Brown. Yes, Ryan Poles had a good piece in that trade, but still, it was just because you had a disgruntled offensive lineman. So to me, I don't really think that we would be trading for an offensive lineman. We'd more so be signing one. And this is where we're looking at polls saying, okay, so what do you want to do? Because from a tackle perspective, there's not a lot of like great young talent. There's a lot of solid, okay players out there, but you're looking at like Eric Fisher. Does anybody love Eric Fisher? I've never heard anybody say I absolutely love him. Like he's absolutely great. We have to pick him up. Hear people say, "Well, we kind of need a tackle. It'd be nice if we had him," but nobody's in love with him. And I think that's what Poles is looking for: is that if he's going to sign a starter, he's going to be in love with it, like an Ogunjobi. He wanted to make sure that this is the guy, and he went out and he got him. But really, to me, you got to be looking at some of these veterans, and maybe that's where he's saying, let's wait till maybe after the draft to pick up a Jason Peters, pick up a Dwayne Brown, pick up some of these tackles that are older veterans that are still capable. Maybe that's what his mindset is. Like you might just want to sign them right now and say, hey, we got the veteran and we're gonna just lock down that side of the line. That's what just gets me a little bit nervous is I just want to see what's going on in his mind because there's some good players that can still be starters. Like I said, Dwayne Brown, Jason Peters, those guys would be very good on this offensive line, but but we just haven't signed them yet. Who do you think that the Bears should sign on the offensive line? Do you think or do you guys really like Dakota Dozier? Let me know down in the comments below. But also too, just like from the guard perspective, just so I can touch base on it, the guards there's really not many left. So that's the big reason why that from a guard perspective, we actually went through the available free agents a week ago, and a lot of those guards have not been picked up. So and a lot of those too are all like left guards. So there's not many for us to select from. And like I said, I can't really see us getting too many free agent guards, except, and how could I bypass this? It's right in my notes, but I bypassed it. Ryan Bates from the Buffalo Bills. He's the big kind of newsworthy person that we've been talking to. He's kind of, if you don't know who Ryan Bates is, don't worry. Not many people do. Not actually a lot of Bills fans probably know who Ryan Bates is. The way I would kind of put him out there as is he's the Alex Bars, yet again, the backup to the Bills. And when they had him, he was an undrafted free agent and he kind of moved around a little bit, but he found a home with the Bills. And every time that he's come in, he's actually done pretty well. And I think that's why a lot of people are looking at him and saying, hey, we want to give you an opportunity. If you look at what Poles has been doing, he's been bringing in free agents and giving them opportunities. Lucas Patrick, he's been someone that was really kind of fighting for a starting spot, and now he's going to be the starter, the guy. And he did the same thing with a Justin Jones and even Morrow. Same thing where he's got these people that it's either their first year as a starter or maybe their second-ish year that he wants to bring in. So if we sign Ryan Bates, it's his first year as an actual starter. It would be a bold move by Ryan Poles and saying, hey, I trust what my eyes see on the tape and I like it and I want to bring him in. Now, there is one thing that not a lot of people are talking about. He's a restricted free agent. He signed the offer sheet, and that offer sheet is an original round tenor. So what that means is that normally when someone signs the original round tenor, if somebody then puts out an offer, and let's say the Bears give an offer, and then Bates says, yes, I agree to the Bears, then you have to look to see where was Ryan Bates drafted. Like I mentioned before, he was undrafted. So we don't have to give any draft picks up. We would then be able to sign him. But the Buffalo Bills have the right to kind of match that offer and then bring in Bates. So that's something, it's a two-way street. The Bears can say, hey, we have a new offer to Ryan Bates that's 2 years, $10 million, we'll just say. But the Bills can say, hey, that's our guy. I like him. I want him on our team, and they can just pick him up just like that. So that's something to watch out for. Do we have interest? Do we have an offer? And will the Bills actually pick that up? I'm interested to see if does this kind of fade out now that Dakota Dozier is around. Honestly, I'd rather have Bates than Dozier. Bates is also a young guy, so you know that Ryan Poles loves that. But we will see. Let me know down below, how far off do you think this offensive line is? And this is the biggest question too. I'm really curious, what do people think of these tackles, Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borom? Do you think they're for real? Do you think that you need to replace one of them? Do you think you got to replace both? What are your thoughts below? What would you do? And with that, thank you again for listening to me with the sickness. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like so that you can actually hear the actual voice. But thank you guys so much. And Unbearable Sports Podcast, we're out.
Yeah, she's got some nice long hair, and you know that she's a bad chick.
Thank you for listening to this Belly Up Sports Podcast Network product. Some said we go belly up, so we made it our name, and we're still here.